Hey y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. This is our 8th episode of a series that we're calling Legacy and Tea, where we spill the tea on all end of life matters. My name is Angel Williams, legacy stylist and founder of Sunset Concierge, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Dana Lamoureux. Hi Dana!
Hi, good to
How
be
are
here.
you?
I'm well, thank you. I have my morning beverage, so
Yay!
everything
So
is good. Yeah.
Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about diet and dying. So can you tell us a little bit about you and how you got into this space?
Absolutely. So I'm a registered dietitian. I live in Alberta, Canada. And I, like many people, the way that I came to be passionate about palliative care was not, I guess, a smooth or a straight road. I went back to school to be a dietitian as sort of a second career.
Okay.
And when I was doing that, I needed some money to get me through school. So I took on a research position at a local cancer hospital, and it ended up being palliative care research. So that was brand new to me. And I did it because I knew the professor involved, but not because of any sort of a passion for palliative care.
Okay.
But it was in those 2 years working in a cancer hospital and studying nutrition at the same time and getting to know families that was where the passion really started to develop. It was such a remarkable thing to be involved with families and people at that stage of their life when it was so fragile or it was so tender. It was just a very sacred place.
Right.
And so that was where the passion began. Mm-hmm. And so when I finished, I did work in that hospital as an oncology dietitian casually. And then life threw me a curve and our family had to move. And the only job that I could get in the new city we moved to was in long-term care. Oh. And I remember when I interviewed that the dietitian that interviewed me said, you're going to find there's a lot of crossover between what you've done in oncology and palliative care with what you're about to do in long-term care. And I sort of rolled my eyes and was like, sure. and there was, because again, for many people in long-term care, not all, they're approaching the end of life. They're thinking more about what do I really want? What's really important to me right now? And so the crossover was really amazing. And it just felt like I got to continue doing the same kind of work. So that's where it, I guess, has evolved from, was just working in those fields and seeing what a special group of people it is.
Okay, so let's really get into it. So does diet really matter at the end of one's life?
Yes, it does. But it matters in different ways depending on who you are. Mm-hmm. So it always comes back to a conversation with the resident, with the person, with their families, and finding out what it is that's important to them at that point. So, I mean, the end of life journey is really different for everybody. And so we look at what are your goals, what's important to you. And for some people, when they realize that they are approaching the last days, weeks, months, years of their life, wherever they're at, that changes for them how they want to approach how they live. So some people really want to aggressively address their medical conditions. So there'll be some people who are still like, let's, make sure my diabetes is really under control and that I'm following a diabetic diet and I really want to manage this aggressively. And there's other people, and I find this is sort of the process that starts to unfold, who say, you know what? I want to enjoy cake again.
Yeah.
Or I know I have trouble swallowing, but if there's any way we can help me still have food A, B, C, or D, I'd really appreciate that. So one of the reasons I love my job is that it's about finding out where the person is at and then trying to develop strategies based on what they wish. So whether that's aggressive medical management or trying to provide comfort foods and things that they miss that had been kind of taken away from them, not taken away, but they had to exclude because of
Right.
medical conditions. So
Right.
we work on trying to bring some of those things back.
I see.
So yes, it's very important, but how it's important depends on the person.
I see. Yeah, I remember a friend of mine had his mom who was terminal, and she was a health enthusiast her entire life. And she ended up getting, very sick. And she decided that she wanted to eat every type of cake.
Mm-hmm.
Cake and wine
Mm-hmm.
was her daily request. And it got to the point where, I mean, she was bedridden. And so she started putting on so much weight that he was having issues moving her, because he would have to move her to help her with changing, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to the point where he had to have the conversation, I think you're eating too terribly right now, and you need to cut back a little bit. And she said, no, I want to enjoy my last days. I went through many years sacrificing, eating totally healthy. I still got sick, and I want cake every day. And she was adamant about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So if someone is terminal, are there certain things that are safer to eat?
Well, again, that depends on what they're struggling with. So some people may have, for example, they've got kidney problems. Maybe they have had to watch the potassium in their diet because their kidney's not able to manage that potassium. Right. So I guess we look at some of those things, and in some cases we can manage things with medications instead, so we can free up their diet a little bit. Right. If we can manage things with some of their medications. And again, I'm thinking things like potassium, or for someone with diabetes, we change their medication, but gives them greater freedom in what they're allowed to eat. If somebody has a swallowing problem though, or things aren't going down so well, then that's sort of a different kind of safety. So we have to manage the textures of their diet. Maybe they can't have pieces of meat safely. So we have to kind of change the texture of their food. So it depends on what safety issue we're dealing with. Right. And again, I've got people who've got swallowing problems who still say, you know what, I want to run that risk of choking and coughing and possibly getting a pneumonia from things going down the wrong pipe. But I'd rather have that than not have my meat or my buns or whatever it is that they really enjoy. So yeah, safety does change, and that's part of the conversation.
And in cases like that, would you be able to, I'm sure there are ways to give it in other forms. So for example, if someone is having an issue swallowing, then maybe they can like blend the stuff, or so they still have the taste, because the taste is what they're after, correct?
The taste is part of what they're after. So yes, there's a number of textures, and depending on what jurisdiction you're in, they're called different things, but they go from regular foods, like for example, toffee and popcorn and hard crunchy things, right through to, you may have heard of pureed or blended. So that would be food that's right in a blender, and it's a single consistency. So we do have ways of changing texture, but although they're looking for the taste, for sure, the way that food feels in your mouth is actually a huge part of your enjoyment too. And so you can have pureed steak, you can have pureed just about anything, but there are people who are like, it's just not the same. Right. And so then there's conversations about how can we do this as safely as possible, but trying to give you a little bit of that feel as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
Oh, it's like an art. The science of nutrition, but there's a lot of art involved.
So as I mentioned earlier about my friend and his mom with the weight gain, should that really be a concern if someone is terminal, weight gain or weight loss?
Right. Well, weight loss is probably one of the biggest things that I deal with, for sure, because that's a really common thing as people are beginning the dying process. Weight gain as well. I mean, because people become less active and less mobile, Some people go the other direction and they start gaining weight.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, for most people, unless it's something they want to address, I try not to make it a thing.
Okay.
I really try not to. I know in some cases it has had to be addressed in some form because, like your friend's mom, who got quite large, it can make care difficult. Some people require more staff to move them and help them and whatever if their weight gets too big. But as much as possible, my philosophy is to try not to make that a thing and just to change the staffing, change the care, to allow the person's enjoyment, as much as you can, as much as we can.
Okay. So at that stage, are there things or foods that can be taken to maybe prolong someone's life or shorten someone's life? Does diet at that stage affect that?
Like I'll go back to, for example, kidney disease.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody has issues with processing potassium, for example, and they are eating foods that are high in potassium, that could cause heart problems, that could cause cardiac issues and death. So I suppose if the person chose that they wanted to do that anyway, they could make choices that might cause an event that could cause death. Or for example, somebody with swallowing problems, if they say, I don't care, and decide to eat a large steak, they could choke. Mm-hmm. And die as a result. So I suppose, but my job is to try and make them aware of those risks. So if they choose to have those risks, at least it was done with knowledge.
Right, okay.
Right? Foods that prolong life. I mean, if a person is losing weight, I will try to intervene sometimes with supplements or making sure they're having more protein in their diet. So I try to slow down weight loss.
Right.
Because there's so many reasons why you want adequate protein and you want not to lose weight. But fundamentally, when a person is passing away or is in the process of dying of a disease, usually that will happen regardless. So food is not often a primary factor, I guess, in hastening death. Like this is depending on the decisions a person makes. I suppose if they choke or something, it could come faster, but it's not going to be the reason very often.
I see.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I come across a lot of people who are dealing with dementia or caregivers who have family members who are dealing with dementia.
Yes.
So how does food come into play when someone can no longer physically remember how to eat?
Well, dementia is a process and a fascinating one, a difficult one. And the struggles with nutrition change as dementia progresses. Mm-hmm. So it starts with somebody being at risk for losing weight because they simply forget to eat.
Right.
And as it moves along, they may forget what a fork or a knife is even for. Mm-hmm. And so they're not able to eat as effectively. And that puts them at risk for weight loss again. Mm-hmm. And then as it progresses, it does get to the point where the brain has been damaged so that they're swallowing and chewing. And as you say, remembering to eat or knowing how to eat mm-hmm. is affected. And usually what we do at that point is intervene with more staff assistants or family assistants. They're given more help at meal times, more cueing, more encouragement. They may need someone to totally feed them, right? Like put the spoon to their mouth, remind them to chew, that sort of thing. But I still see meals as an incredibly valuable time because it reduces isolation. It's a chance for engagement. It's a chance for socializing. It's a chance to touch that person and help them know that they're loved. So even if a person isn't really functionally eating the way that they used to, I absolutely try and get everybody out into the dining room. It's part of a routine, comforting. It's a social opportunity. So nutrition aside, it's super important, I think.
I see. Okay. So the focus changes a little bit, but the importance is still there.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the last days, when someone is really at the very end.
Mhm.
Um, at that stage, what is the goal really in terms of food and diet?
Right. In the very final days and hours, really, we're not looking at nutrition for supporting life anymore. Like I would never expect somebody to get enough calories to sustain life or to meet their requirements.
Mhm.
So the shift, and hopefully if I've done my job well, the family and the resident are with me on this, but
Right.
it's really about comfort.
Okay.
And so what does a person want or not want? In the final days, our appetite really decreases.
Mhm.
Our need for food decreases because our metabolism and our bodies are slowly shutting down. And so the main thing is what brings a person comfort and enjoyment. For some people, that means sipping on fluids and just having a nice moist mouth.
Right.
Um, some people, I mean, depending on their level of awareness and consciousness, still want that piece of cake, and that's fine too.
Mhm.
So it depends on what their consciousness is, what they can eat safely, and what they request. I encourage families to offer food and to try and bring things that they enjoy and can eat safely. But at all times, if the person says, no, I'm just not up to it, that's okay. And we want to respect their wishes at
Right.
that point. So it's about offering, but never forcing. And that can be very hard for
Sure.
families to make that switch to this is no longer about sustaining their life. This is about what they wish and what they would enjoy.
Right. And I feel like oftentimes a caregiver will feel like if we could just get food in, they'll be okay. What's really happening right now that they're not eating is that they're starving to death. And
Mm.
so if, we could just get some food in, things will be prolonged. So what advice would you give to a caregiver who is kind of fighting with that a little bit and feeling like they can do something with food by way of food to prevent their loved one from starving to death?
Yeah, that is such a hard one, Angel. That's a really hard one because as loved ones and just in society in general, we associate how we care for people with feeding them and
Yeah.
like it's a huge part of what we do
Mm-hmm.
to feel like we're doing our part and we're
Right.
making sure that it's okay. So that's a really hard one for people to let go of, and I get that. Part of my work with families is trying to educate them
Right.
on that switch.
Mm-hmm.
So to let them know that their loved one is not hungry or thirsty the way that you and I are. Like those feelings are shutting down and are not the same as you and I. So we project onto that person, say, they haven't eaten a meal in 3 days. They must feel horribly
Right.
because
The
we will.
suffering.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But those parts of the brain are not as sharp. They're shutting down. And so appetite and hunger are not the same.
I see.
And so if we can kind of work with them, embrace that and work on the comfort and keeping them comfortable, keeping their mouth moist, that's actually more powerful in those final days. But it's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So much information. I feel like I could talk forever.
Yeah.
But what resources are out there, or how can someone find out some more information and connect with you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I just got my website up and going.
Ooh,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's
Okay.
www.continuingthecare.com.
Okay.
So, yeah, continuingthecare.com. And there is a place to connect with me on that website if people would like to do that. There's also links from there to my YouTube and other resources as well. I guess the other thing I could recommend for people is, depending on what diseases they are dealing with, if they look on some of those websites, like if a person has Alzheimer's or dementia, if you look for some of those websites, they often have links to, dementia and nutrition or Alzheimer's and nutrition.
Okay.
But please feel free to come and visit me on my website, and I can direct further from there.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you for all of that information. Guys, we're going to have the link to Dana's website. It will be in the description below. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for joining. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Bye-bye.